year, 50th anniversary, and we have the wonderful task of collecting, preserving, and showcasing the history of Jews in Dallas from about the 1860s on to the present day. And we do that through many ways, one of which is our oral history program. We have about 750 oral history interviews in our catalog, many of which are online. And we also have a variety of programs, the Jim Schwartz lecture series, as well as many other events.
Oh, you're muted. Somehow you're muted. Deborah, you got muted.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. And so every other year, we have a program called One Story at a Time, where we spotlight either a family or a group of people who have made their home in Dallas and made an impact. And this past year, our intention was to honor Jews from Latin America who have come and made Dallas their home at some point or another. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we ended up having to postpone the program, but we will be holding it this year on May 27th, and we're so thrilled to be able to participate in this program, as well as some of the others that are happening, to honor those people who came for a variety of reasons and from many countries in Latin America and South America as well to Dallas and have made Dallas their home. And so Viva Shalom will take place on Zoom May 27th, and you'll hear more about it, but we look forward to seeing you there. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Marta Olchyk, many of you know from her years in Dallas. Born in Havana, Cuba, Marta immigrated to the US with her family in 1960. They subsequently moved to Dallas after where she earned a master's degree in Spanish and a PhD in Latin American civilization. For 6 years, she worked as a high school teacher and a college professor for years after that. She also served as an active board member of Hadassah, the Dallas Jewish Federation, which is what it was called at that time, the American Association of University Women, and Federally Employed Women. For 28 years, Marta worked as an investigator and researcher for the federal government, as well as with the Office for Civil Rights, Department of Education, and then with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. In July 2000, she moved to Miami and continued working for the EEOC. She has served as an active member of Hadassah, the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, American Israel Political Action Committee, AIPAC, and since 2010, Marta has also worked for 3 consecutive terms as a commissioner of Surfside, Florida, and for 15 years as a board member of the Marbella Condominium. So thank you for coming, Marta, for being with us, and we're so excited to hear your story.
Thank you. Well, you really gave my whole life history there very thoroughly, so I hope I don't disappoint any of you. I want to thank the Tycher Library and its representative, Karen Schlossberg, for inviting me to be a part of this program today. I have a lot of connections with the Tycher Library. My daughter-in-law is a niece of the Tycher family. I also have a connection with the Dallas Historical Society. My husband, my late husband, Oscar Olchyk, was the first treasurer of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. So my 40 years of living in Dallas made me very connected with the Jewish community there, and I treasure that very much. Today, I'm going to pay tribute to the country that accepted legal Jewish refugees to its midst and offered them an opportunity to live and develop as productive segment of society while trying to rescue their relatives and bring them to America. It is a privilege to give a brief background to the civilization where the story of Ruth Bear's book took place. I have known Ruth since 1962 when I was studying my master's degree at TWU, and she came to lecture on her specialty, anthropology. Then I met her again in DC in the Mexican embassy when my daughter Sonia took me there to hear a lecture from her. And then years later, here in Miami, where she comes very frequently because, as Karen said, she has a condominium here, so we see each other quite often. I have enjoyed reading her books and her insight on Cuban culture. I'm going to first give you like a brief background of how the civilization and the culture was in Cuba. And then when I finish, thanks to the effort of my daughter Sonia, we're going to see some few pictures that would highlight what I just presented. My parents came to Cuba with a wave of Ashkenazi immigrants coming from countries like Poland, Hungary, Germany, Czechoslovakia, etc., in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Most of them came penniless with only a few belongings, but with lots of hope and dreams to be able to start a new life in the land of the free. Many thought that they were landing in the United States, and to their surprise, they arrived to this tropical island without any knowledge of the language spoken or to the countries or the customs of this new civilization. They were expecting freezing cold, and they were greeted by cheering crowds under the baking sun. They were expecting to find Anglo-Saxons, and instead they were surrounded by warm crowds of white, blacks, and mulattoes. That for them was the first time they saw such a mixture of races. When the Cuban customs asked them how much money they had with them to sustain themselves, they started sharing a $5 bill that they were passing from one to another, according to my father's recollection. This allowed them to pass through customs. In this manner, they started a new life without a trade, since most of them were peasants, without language, since none of them spoke Spanish, and without money. They started a new life only with a deep desire to work hard and prosper in this new land. The bulk of the Sephardi community came from Spain, Morocco, Turkey, etc. They came a few years earlier and had somewhat an easier adaptation process since they spoke Ladino, which is a Romance language quite similar to Spanish. And they also were more used to the tropical warmth lifestyle, their music, and their mixture of races. The immigrants wasted no time in finding how to make a living, and since the only avenue available to them, due to their lack of resources, was to buy and sell products, they became street peddlers of articles of clothing, food, hardware, etc. In order to be able to compete with the established stores, they created something similar to the layaway credit system that my brother Boris Olchyk, who is honoring me by being here in this shot, explained very carefully and very thoroughly in some of his books. They would sell their wares with verbal promise of later being paid. These clients became a steady source of sales for them, and they would actually tell them what they wanted for them to bring them so that they can buy it for them. This was the first step of learning a new trade and becoming businessmen. Most of them became very successful at it, allowing them to bring their dear ones one at a time as soon as they were able to save enough money to do so. Within 25 to 30 years, the Jewish community in Cuba grew to approximately 12 to 15,000 people by 1960. From the very beginning, they knew that in order for them not to assimilate to this welcoming community, they needed to create Jewish institutions. And they worked very efficiently at it. They established cemeteries for both communities, the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi. They established Jewish day schools with bilingual curriculum, Yiddish and Spanish, of all denominations, Zionist, like the Centro Israelita, religious, like the Takemoni, and many other schools. They created youth organizations, like the Unión Sionista, the Vizo, where I was active in the Young Vizo, and today in the chat, some of my ex-board members from the Young Vizo are participating today here, like Raquelita Bacalar. They also had other Jewish organizations like the B'nai B'rith. My husband was very active in the B'nai B'rith. Ashomer, Noar, Círculo Universitario, where the university students would go to meet in the Círculo Universitario. In my hometown, Marianao, a suburb of Havana, my family, which from my father's side was very large, 8 brothers and a sister, all married with family, created a Jewish social club, which became very popular for bringing renowned speakers, theater plays of Jewish topics, performed by amateurs and professionals as well. And regular parties were also held there and were very well attended and attracted a lot of youngsters, both Ashkenazi and Sephardic, of the surrounding communities. Many young people met their future spouses there, including some of my family members. It was very important for these immigrants to create a philanthropic organizations. And from the very beginning, they had organizations that helped the newly immigrants find a job, housing, and monetary assistance as needed. In the 1950s, a community center, which was a social hall, a synagogue, a library, was created. It was called El Patronato, in a very exclusive neighborhood where most big social events, such as weddings, took place, and all the Jewish organizations were housed there. It was imposing architecture structure. Later on, when we visited Cuba, it was taken over by the Castro government, and it was converted, half of it, into a kitchen hall, serving food to the surrounding communities. You can imagine how sad it was for us to see that. As time went on, the Cuban Jewish society became very sophisticated, bringing leaders from all over the world, such as Golda Meir, who visited the Cuban Jewish community for a big fundraising event that took place in the Hilton Hotel, where I was privileged to attend with my parents. It was one of the most successful Bonds of Israel events ever held. Other leaders like Menachem Begin also came to lecture and raise funds, and even visited some families as ours to raise much needed funds to help Israel in their efforts for independence. And you're going to see some pictures that would show him in some of my relatives' house. He was accompanied to these events by some volunteers of our youth who were responsible for his safety and well-being. Our youth was so highly motivated and society-oriented that they took part in a very risky operation to bring much needed armament to Israel in the famous ship Altalena, where some of them lost their lives, others stayed in Israel, and the rest returned to Cuba after a while. It is interesting to note that one of the youth leaders was a Black youngster, which was quite unusual in Cuba, who converted to Judaism and married a Jewish young lady. And some of his children and grandchildren now live here in Miami as well. As a side note, our Hadassah Inter-American branch, of which I am an active member since I arrived here 20 years ago, last year we did a program honoring the 8 survivors of this Altalena heroic endeavor. They and their family members attended, and we had over 265 attendees. Although the majority of the Jewish community lived in Cuba, in Havana, there were pockets of Jews living in other parts of the country, like Santiago de Cuba, Cienfuegos, etc. But most of their parents would send their youngsters to live in Havana with their relatives or friends when they were of marriage age, since they knew that the chances of their youngsters to find Jewish suitable partners was greater in the capital than anywhere else. We should also stress that the generation of Cuban Jews born in the new country were highly encouraged by their parents to get a good education. For this reason, the parents even both their children as young as 5 or 6 years old to go to the Jewish day school called Centro Israelita, where we stayed all day. We had lunch at a restaurant across the street, and we stayed there from early in the morning until approximately 4 p.m. in the afternoon. My brother had the distinction of being one of the most brilliant students in that school. In the late 1950s, the board of directors of that school, where my late husband, Oscar Olchyk, was a treasurer, created a Jewish high school where I was honored to teach for approximately 2 years while I was attending the University of Havana School of Philosophy and Letters. Some of my ex-students there are now living in Dallas, like Felicia Gales Levy, like David Weinstein and others. That school had to close when the new regime imposed strict rules on what to teach the students so that they will be favorably inclined to the new communist ideas of the government. For example, they would send militiamen, which they called milicianos, who visited classrooms of young students and told the students to close their eyes and ask God for candies. When they asked them to open their eyes, obviously they didn't find any. Then they asked them to do it again, but now to ask Fidel for the same thing. Then when they distributed the candies, they asked the children to open their eyes, and obviously they showed them that even though God did not exist, Fidel did. We should also know that even though the Jewish community was very well received in all circles of life, the participation of Jews in politics was very limited. Although there were some exceptions, like we have somebody living in Dallas whose name is Julio Gojere, who was one of the few that was involved in politics, and others that were very communist oriented. Were in Cuba. His name is Olchyk and Grobar. They were some of the high communist leaders in the community, but this was not very, it was a rare exception. In the Cuban society, there were few exclusive clubs where only the elite was allowed. So the Spaniards had their own beach club and the Jews had their own. In it, it was called Casino Deportivo, most of the youth are participated in all types of sports, as well as social events, becoming another meeting point for young adults. In 1959, it all started to crumble when the Castro regime took over the government and the society took a turn to the left. For example, usually on Sundays, Castro would enact new decrees, such as the one that said, starting Monday, the owners of the stores, of the apartment buildings and such were no longer the owners. They would be intervened by government emissaries who would designate who would be collecting the money, which would be turned over to the government. Many employees who had worked at these businesses for many years now became partners in crime. These actions reminded the Jewish immigrants that they had what they had to endure before leaving their homeland. And consequently, especially the well-established businessmen and professionals immediately started making plans to leave as soon as possible the country which they cherished so much, but they knew that they would have to avoid what happened to them and their dear ones in their country of origin. So they decided to emigrate yet once again and leave everything behind and venture to the uncertain future that awaited them. But for them, after suffering pogroms and persecution, freedom was more important than anything in their lives. It is estimated that the Jewish community now living in Cuba is roughly around 600 or so, of which most of them are of mixed races and religions. But for one reason or another, they decided to stay and not to start a new life in a foreign country. It was very hard for us to see that even though we met with the leaders of these different communities in Cuba, very few knew about the tradition. And if it wouldn't be for some of the rabbis that were sent there by the Federation, there would be very little knowledge of Judaism. I'm going to share some pictures with you that would pertain the subject that was covered above, which was organized and produced by my daughter Sonia. I want you to know that Dallas was my home for 40 wonderful years of my life. And we were there thanks to my brother Boris, who came to Dallas before we left Cuba, and we decided to join him in Dallas, my parents, myself, and our son Sammy, who was only 8 months old when we came to Cuba. In Dallas, we were able to continue our education, worked, volunteered, and it will always be remembered very dearly as my second home. I thank you for your patience and to listen to this subject that is so dear to my heart. Thank you all. Now, this first slide is of Krinik, which is the place where my parents were born, where they immigrated from. And as you see, when we went there a few years ago, we asked a person to be our tour guide there. She's a university professor, and she took us through how Krinik now is. As you see, it's leveled, and there is nothing there. And they used many of the stones of the cemeteries to for their construction of homes. So it was very sad to see how Poland has treated our fellow Jews. Next. These are some of the individuals that were bused from Warsaw to different places in Poland and ended up in different towns like Krinik. They were there both in order to be able to work there. Next. That's a picture of Centro Israelita when I was a student. And I was there in the second row, as you can see. Uh, that was one of the pictures of my school. Uh, so this is very, very old pictures, you can tell. Next. Okay, the picture to the right was taken when I was teaching in high school. There in the Centro Israelita High School, which was created, as I said, and I was able to be teaching there only about a couple of years because in 1959, it was Castro took over the government. So this is the yearbook that was done that year, and this to the left, you see the students, and to the right is I was teaching there. By the way, I have to say also that just as some of the communities, like the Catholic community, had created a Catholic university like Villanova, a very renowned university, and the Masons had created a Mason university, so was the Jewish community. We were working, not me, but the board of directors, and my husband again was a treasurer there, was working in creating a Jewish university as soon as they started working in this project with the high school. So the university, the Jewish university in Cuba would have become a reality years later had it not been for the takeover of the communists in Cuba. Next. That was my parents' store. Is called El Encanto. Okay, it used to be a very big store compared to the standards, and now it's partitioned. And a part of it is like you see here, ice cream place, another is a pawn shop, another place is, so they have partitioned the store. We used to have the main store, and then we had to the right, we had a shoe store. To the left, we had a fabric store. Well, all of it, when we went there back to see it, is of course not. The flooring was a black mosaic, and it's dirt, it's pure dirt. Now, as you see to your left, it says the year that it was built in 1941. And this is the entrance that would go upstairs to our bedrooms. And as you see, it's all dilapidated. The stairs had, it's just pure dirt. Everything that you see, it's like, you know, in a war-torn country. This is a clothing store of one of my uncles, Olchyk, who emigrated to Israel while everybody else came to Miami and to the United States. He was the only one that emigrated to Israel. And that's in Cuba, how more or less some of the brothers had their stores. My father would always be buying the clothing for everybody, and he would distribute to some of them. Next. Okay, this to your right is a theater play that it was presented. You see to the far right, Martinka Diaz, which was one of my best friends. And she was a professional theater actor. And she helped us, even though she's not Jewish, she helped us with all our theater plays, with all of our cultural events, poetry, etc. And to the left, you see her with me. We were in one of the strolling around the University of Havana. Both of us were very close friends, and we were usually do that. And she was one of those individuals that played a lot of impact on me. Next. This is the cemetery. And to your left, you're going to see the cemetery of the Ashkenazi community, but just the same would be to the Sephardi community. To the right is the tomb of one of our very close friends. Actually, he was like a family member. He was a refugee that my parents took over, like many Jews did, that they took over people that had no family coming from the Holocaust. And he was one that lived with us because he had no family, no friends or anything in Cuba. And he lived with us until he finally died. When we came to the United States, he didn't want to leave the country. He wanted to stay behind, thinking that he would save my parents' stores. And unfortunately, he died in his apartment upstairs. We don't know under what circumstances he died, but that's my daughter has his name, Sonia, is because he's Simha. So that's her name. Next. This is the Jewish patronato, as I was saying. It is very impressive. And it looks like that today. We took that picture when we were there 12 years ago. This is the entrance of the main sanctuary. To your in the center, you see the main sanctuary. To the right, you see I was there usually going to the library. And now this is the library where I was a volunteer there at the library. To the left now here, you see the board of directors that were usually organizing all the Jewish events, the big events, the new schools, the new, everything that was there was done by a group of people. One of them was my uncle that was in the presidential board of directors of the school. To the right is the Orthodox Jewish synagogue in Old Havana, which Old Havana actually housed, like in many other Latin American countries, that all the Jews went to one place. All the businessmen were in Old Havana, and they had one store after the other. Most of them were wholesalers of clothing, of fabrics, of plastics, etc. And in Old Havana, this is where the Unión Hebrea Shevet Ahim was located. Next. This is in Marianao. This is my family years ago. They had, whenever we had a celebration, a Pesach or whatever, we had it there. And as you see, very Zionist oriented. This is the social hall where the we met, and all of them, as you see, I'm there with my mother and my brother, my parents. My grandma is in the very middle, is the matriarch of the family, and all her children are surrounding her. All of this is the Olchyk family. And as you see on the wall, you see a picture of Herzl. You also see a picture of Marti. And this was a social hall utilized by the community in general. Yes, Deborah, it's Theodora Herzl. Next. This is a gathering of Zionist women. We had, as I said, the Yom Vitzo, we had the Unión Sionista, we had many social organizations. And some of them in the middle, you see it's one of my aunts. In the very middle is the wife of Berel Kosolchik, the ones that emigrated to Israel with all their family. Right now, they're still there with their children and grandchildren. They live from anywhere in Israel. They live in Tel Aviv and kibbutzim and in moshavim. They live everywhere. Next. This is the picture that I was telling you about from when Menahem Begin was in Cuba and he was visiting the house of one of our relatives. We have another one like that from our house. This is the one standing is my grandmother, and sitting next to her is Menahem Begin. And to the right is the invitation that was received saying El Libertador. That's the invitation that we received when he came to speak in Cuba. So it was a very lively Jewish community and very Zionist oriented. Next. This is the invitation of the Hadassah program that we organize here in Miami. And this is, we were very fortunate to work very hard at trying to find the relatives of these 8 surviving heroes. Some of them live even within walking distance from my apartment here. And we were very fortunate to be able to have them while they are still alive. They're in their 90s. So we did a program, and I said it was very emotional because we hadn't even seen the family of the person that I referred in my talk that that he is Black, and the community overwhelmingly approved his joining our community, and he was a very active Zionist leader within our community, and so were his family members. Okay, I think that I gave you a very brief synopsis of what Cuba was before I was born and when I was born. By the time I left, there were I spent there 22 very formative years, and I'm very grateful to God to be able to have all this experience of living in Cuba, living in Dallas, now living in Miami. So I have been very fortunate, and I know that, and my way of saying thanks to God is by giving to others as much as I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta. So now we would be happy to open it up for questions. So you're welcome to unmute. People were very impressed and very appreciative of the slide presentation and the pictures. Sonia, you did a beautiful job at putting it all together.
Worked very hard on it. She worked very hard on it.
It showed. All right, let's see if we have, if anybody wants to mute. People are saying wonderful presentation. And I apologize. I know that some of you said that there were problems with being able to see it. I'm not sure what that problem was with there, but definitely. And I also had a question if the slide presentation could be made available to anybody who'd be interested. And if it's okay with Sonia and Marta, I'm happy to do that.
Marta, that was wonderful. We really enjoyed it. It's Marilyn Aaron from many years ago. Marilyn and Norm Aaron.
Oh yeah, sure. Sure do.
So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You did a great job. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Marta, muchas gracias. This is Ruth Feldman. You helped my parents when we came from El Salvador many years ago. And we met you in Dallas. That was Jose and Mercedes Baum.
Sure.
So I met you many years ago, and naturally El Salvador's Jewish community and Cuba's was very similar, only we were just very, very tiny, but we also had Golda Meir coming, and your speech brought many memories.
Thank you.
But we had, and a rabbi that we had in Salvador was the rabbi that was in Cuba about 8 years ago, and then he came to Salvador community.
Sure, I remember very well. You were in Dallas. I was very fortunate of being able to work in the Federation, in the CRC. As a matter of fact, after I left, Eti took over my position there, Eti Friedman, Dr. Friedman. I was the first non-Dalasite in the CRC, helping the community to be more understanding of other parts of the community in Dallas, because when I came to Dallas, also they were not very used to other cultures and other civilizations. So one of my self-appointed duties was to help immigrants that would come to Dallas and were of Latin American descent or outside the country. And that's how I met many like you and Eti and others. Sure. Thank you.
Gracias.
No, gracias a ti.
So Marta, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you. Muchas gracias
sure.
for the beautiful presentation. Very nice. And like the other lady who talked to you from Central America, reminds me of my own community in Venezuela. You know, I guess the Jewish people have something in common. They first establish a cemetery, then a community, then they start meeting in homes before they have the center and all that. So, and I remember when we came to Dallas with my husband, and so we met you, we met your parents, then my mother came, and my mother met your parents. You know, it was wonderful at that time. So we miss you, Marta.
Thank you, Eti.
When the virus goes, come and visit us again. We'll make a reception for you.
Okay, thank you. My parents, when they came to Dallas with us, in order for them to feel more at home, one of the things that they needed in order to lift their spirits is they told me that they wanted to have people their age that would speak Yiddish.
Right.
So thanks to Hadassah, I spoke to Temple Emmanuel and they started a Lomer Redney Yiddish, Let's Speak Yiddish group. And in this group, many of the parents of immigrants from Latin America, like myself, their parents participated there. And so it was very, very helpful for us to be able to have again this community helping each other to feel again that they're not isolated. So that's how I met many. Rose, to your question, I mentioned that they think that there are about 600 or so Cuban Jews still left. But the reality is that it depends on what you consider a Jew. And many of them are converts that are really not converts, but they marry Jews. Others are of mixed races. Like, for example, the president that I met from the Sephardic synagogue, his daughter is Black. The grandchildren are Black. And the very little that they know about Judaism is because they go once in a while to the Sephardic synagogue, where they receive food, and the shlichim, the emissaries that come from Israel and from the Federation there to Cuba, give lectures there and give them a little bit about what Judaism is all about. So these are the about 600 people that still consider themselves Jews.
Okay. Well, before Marta, I failed to mention your two wonderful children. We were part of our lives. Sonia was in the same class with Gus, my son. And I remember she was one of the few girls that he invited for his bar mitzvah. And my mother was there and she said, they'll make a good pair. Never happened. So anyway, and also Sammy used to be my patient, you know.
That's
and
right.
So, and I saw him in the picture with his wife, very nice. So, and I want to let you know that I am a great grandmother now.
You're ahead of me.
From Paul, my older son. Yeah.
Well, see what a small world, because I don't know if you remember, but when my daughter Sonia was in Israel volunteering in the army, she met your brother there.
Simon, my brother Simon. Okay, yeah,
Uh-huh.
great. I didn't know that. I didn't remember that. I'll ask him. Okay.
Sure do. She sent a
Okay.
picture of him. Yeah,
Wow.
very small world.
Email it to me, Sonia. Email it to me. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Marta, how and when did your parents decide to leave Poland?
That's what I was going to ask. And if there are any parallels to them deciding to leave Cuba.
My parents, I said in the presentation, my parents left Poland in the late 1920s. I was born in Cuba. My brother was born in Cuba, who is 4 years older than I am. So they came to Cuba in the late 1920s.
Did the circumstances parallel each other, or were they completely different? Their departure from Poland and their departure from Cuba. They're fleeing, actually.
Well, it was very different because when they left Cuba to come to the United States, they were very well established in Cuba. And even though they had to leave everything behind, at least they had already a much better life in Cuba than they had in Poland. For my parents, Poland was a very sad experience. My mother especially was very traumatized because unfortunately she was only able to save one sister. And all her parents and grandparents, her sisters, they were all killed in Treblinka, which Sonia and I visited a few years ago, and we pay our respects to that horrible place. So my mother's family had a very hard time.
I have one more question. Can you speak, if I remember, I want you to tell the story about how Israel Bonds helped in the move. ¿Te acuerdas que no tenían los papeles?
Well, no, it was the HIAS.
I'm sorry, HIAS. That's
the
right.
HIAS organization, just like I said, that there were many organizations that helped, just like in all Latin America. They helped Jews to try to leave Latin America, just like they did in Europe. Some of the people, I just saw a program yesterday on the Portugal Jews during the Holocaust, and HIAS was instrumental in trying to save as many lives as they could. So the same thing happened in Cuba, that once they were a little bit established, the first few years they were there, they tried to create organizations that would help others have a better and an easier transition than they had.
My recollection was, I could be very wrong, but they didn't make you present the Israel bonds for you to get some money to cash them in the States, that they trusted your word, something that was very against their normal policy. Is that right?
I don't remember that.
The Israel bonds, okay.
Marta.
Uh-huh.
Hi, this is Angel and Maria.
Oh, Angel.
I guess you know that the little group of Latin American Jews that we have in Dallas is still going on.
I know.
It has been going on for more than 25 years.
Right.
And I just, we would like for you maybe to join us in Zoom.
Okay, great. I remember when Baron, Sustra, and ourselves created that Latin American Havara. I remember that. So I'll be delighted. I mean, I look forward. My years in Dallas were the most rich, culturally wise years I had. Here in Miami is very different. It's more of a, it's a very different community. Very different, to say the least.
Yeah, we are meeting on Zoom every Wednesday, so I will send you a copy of the Zoom, and you can.
Oh, great! That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, 9:30 of your time. Okay.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you, Angel.
All right, and I have a question that I think was mentioned in the movie that was produced, and there is a reference there which is very controversial to me, that the Cuban government wanted to have Europeans coming in the country because they wanted to balance the situation with the blacks. Did you ever hear about that?
What movie are you talking about?
The one that was done by this lady that lives in Michigan.
Ah, Bear, you mean?
Yeah, Behar, yes.
Uh-huh.
I think at the very beginning she mentions that in a commentary.
Well, I didn't feel that the Cuban community in any way reacted negatively towards Cuban Jews. They later on, after the first 20 or so years, when they saw that immigrants from Jewish descent were very good business people, and they took over a lot of from their income. They were obviously resentful of that, but I did not feel that they tried to bring other immigrants in order to make up a different social mixture.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I remember reading it, and it was the first time that
You know, I don't remember that.
any documentation that the government had that policy.
No, don't remember.
Okay. All right.
All right,
Okay.
Marta, I want to also tell you that you have, Jackie from Beth Torah said your friends there miss you a great deal.
Good. Well, I in Dallas, you know, I created a lot of pockets of friends that to this day I have never replaced. As a matter of fact, I received a note the other day from Rabbi Isaac Cohen, and to me, he was my mentor, my wonderful rabbi, wonderful cantor, special friend, and I even made a shida with his niece and David Weinstein. So
I want to thank you so much, so very much for joining us today, for the privilege of your time. Thank you all for the privilege of your time and for joining us. And we look forward when we can all come together. And Marta, I think definitely everybody is waiting for you to come back and visit. So
thank you.
We have a big fan club here.
So am I. So am I.
And Sonia, thank you so much. Deborah, thank you. And stay tuned if you're not on the Dallas Jewish Historical Society's mailing list, get on their mailing list to find out about their wonderful programs, and also at the Tycher Library. So everybody stay healthy, be well. May you get your vaccinations soon.
That's right.
And everyone be well. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Angel, for being the in-between of this. Thank you very much. It was a very nice experience. Thank you all.
Bye, Marta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.